Hi, this is Steve Farber. I'm the founder of the Extreme Leadership Institute. And on today's Love and Loyalty podcast, we're going to be discussing how love is just damn good business. So don't miss it.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? What is the most radical thing you can do in business? Is it paying your people better than your competitor? Is it better brand strategy, better training for your people, better negotiation skills, deeper cutbacks? What about cutting costs on anything? Well, stay tuned because we're going to discuss what really makes damn good business sense. All right? I'm your host, Dov Baron. I am the Dragonist, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. To find out more about me, you can simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you by Magcast. That's Magcast. Imagine having your own industry magazine. What would that do for your authority? Whether you're a coach, a content expert, or an emerging brand, it's hard to stand out from the crowd. So what if there was a proven way to increase both your perceived authority and professional status in the eyes of your market? This is your way to go from being invisible to getting a meeting with anyone. To find out more, go to Magcast, that's Magcast.co, that's C-O, where first-time publishers are creating thriving magazine businesses. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Simply look for the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, I want to thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant, so please get over there, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And if you're a regular listener, a big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every show. We're honored and grateful to be said by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Earlier, I asked you what you think might be the most radical thing you could do in business that's just damn good business. Well, let's find out together. Our guest on this episode is Steve Farber. He is the founder and president of Extreme Leadership Institute. His third book, Greater Than Yourself, The Ultimate Lesson in Leadership, was a Wall Street and USA Today bestseller. His second book, The Radical Edge, I was going to say stroke, but Stoke Your Business, Amp Your Life, and Change Your World, was hailed as the playbook for harnessing the power of the human spirit. His first book, The Radical Leap, A Personal Lesson in Extreme Leadership, is already considered a classic in the leadership field. It received Fast Company magazine's Reader's Choice Award and was recently named as one of the top 100 best business books of all time. And now he's the author of another book, a brand new book called, wait for it, Love is Just Damn Good Business. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome leadership superstar, Mr. Steve Farber.
Wow, such thunderous applause.
Exactly.
What a great pleasure to be here, man. I've been looking forward to this.
Thank
Hey, let
you,
me
man.
just do a little adjustment on my screen for those who are watching. There we go.
Ooh, there it is.
That's
there it is.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Dov.
Hey, mate, it's a
great pleasure to see you.
I'm really glad to have you here. Thank you so much. Where we like to start is not on the subject of your book, but actually on the subject of you. So the question is this: who is somebody that we may not know, that we may never have even heard of, who has been a major influence on you and on your leadership, just really had major impact? Like I said, we may not even know this person or even have considered them.
Yeah. So, it's a great question. One of the great blessings of the work that I've done over the last 30 years is I've had the opportunity to meet all kinds of leaders.
Yes.
In just about every industry and every kind of company. And, like anything else, we can learn a lot from great leaders, and we can learn a lot from terrible leaders. So my greatest inspiration in terms of the leaders that I've met have come from people who have actually been my clients at one time or another. Early on in my career, when I was at the Tom Peters Company, and we had a little client by the name of Bank of America. There was never heard of them. I know they're kind of under the radar. There was at the time he was a middle manager at B of A. His name is Dick Nettle, and since then he's retired. But I watched Dick work his way up through the hierarchy at B of A by virtue of his being a phenomenal leader. Who people often described as somebody that they loved working for. And he was my client technically. And, he'll tell you that he learned a lot from me and from my colleagues, which is lovely, of course. But I'll tell you that his example has stuck with me to such a degree that just about every book I've written, I think there's a Dick Nettle story in it. And now we're connected on Facebook, and I'm watching him go fishing every day. But man, did he leave a legacy, and he created superstars in his work at B of A.
So what is, when you think about him, what is the one thing that, if you could pull as an example of here's how he shifted my leadership by example?
Yeah, I can tell you the moment when it started even. We were doing a series of workshops at B of A, and one of the exercises, kind of a classic discussion exercise, was making a list. We had the group make a list of leaders they admired, right? And we did this in a series. There were probably 20, 25 to 30, something like that, people in each one, and we were working with the whole leadership population of this particular business unit. And every day, every time we do the workshop, you'd get the list of the usual stuff, right? You'd see Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln, and Lee Iacocca was a popular one back then. This was the mid 90s, right?
Yeah.
And so we'd be putting in this list, and then Dick Nettle was put on that list along with these other folks. And every time we would do this exercise, his name would pop up. And I had met him, and I was getting to know him and starting to work with him. But that made such an impression on me that completely unsolicited, his name was up there as leaders that the people that worked for him admired, right? And so I said, okay, I got to pay closer attention to this guy, because Dick was very authentic, very kind of, let's just call it salty language, didn't have a formal education, worked his way up at B of A by starting in the motor pool. There was once upon a time they had a fleet of cars that executives drove, right? So he was the mechanic in the motor pool, worked his way up. So I knew that about him, but now I started to pay closer attention to how he was leading, and what I saw. This is in terms of his behavior. This is what really stuck with me. Whenever we'd be hanging out, and I was a smoker back in those days, and so was he. So we'd be on a break from a workshop or something, and I'd be hanging out outside the building with Nettle smoking a cigarette, and people would be walking by. Employees of B of A would be walking by. And every time somebody walked by, it was like, Dick, how are you? They'd stop and talk to him. They'd light up when they saw him. And, he'd be very gracious with them. They'd walk away. And then he'd turn to me and he would say, let me tell you about that person. And he would tell me a story about that individual. And he just had all of these stories, and the stories were all about the amazing things that this person did and what kind of a contribution they made and what kind of people they were. And I learned that he was so interested in and connected to his employees that he knew who they were as human beings and was a storyteller on their behalf because he cared enough to know their stories, right? I mean, that's
Right.
the underlying theme here. And if you were to ask people who worked for Dick how they felt about him, again, no prompting, nothing, no leading question, just tell me how how you like working for Dick Nettle. What do you think of him? They would always say, and maybe always is a bit of an exaggeration, but very commonly they would say, I love him. I love him. I love working for him. I love the team that he built. I love this work that he leads. And that, as you could tell from the title of my most recent book, has stuck with me. And I've just seen it play out over and over again throughout the years and other leaders. But I think Dick was the one that really first illustrated that for me.
Fantastic. I mean, it's a great example. One of the things that we speak a lot about in leadership in our work is that the model that we follow is understanding that you are the creator of a family and a community, an expanded family, which is a community. And that unfortunately, most of us grew up in some level of a dysfunctional family, some less than more, but with some level of dysfunction. As John Bradshaw once said, 97% of families are dysfunctional and the other 3% are liars. And so, as a leader, we have a responsibility to create a healthy family. And that community is so important. And you can't hold a community without love. You can't hold a family without love. And, your book is Love is Just Damn Good Business. But love is certainly in a business context, most people see it as a pretty sort of squishy subject, particularly to business leaders. So talk to us about why love is just damn good business.
Yeah, love and is not a word that you typically hear in the same sentence as business. And it does make people squirm on the surface because I think the knee-jerk reaction to it is, here comes the California touchy-feely hoo-ha crap, right?
Yeah.
Love
kumbaya,
is
my lord.
Yeah, kumbaya, and so we use the synonyms. So when you talk about, for example, a great team is much akin to a family. And what's a family without love? We all understand that, right?
Sure.
But we're a little more comfortable talking about a team as a family in the context of business, even though, honestly, that makes some people squirm too.
Oh, of course.
Because
it's functional family.
Yeah, that's right. And even in a functional family, there are differences, right? So every analogy breaks down. Like, for example, I've never fired any of my kids, but I have had to fire people at work before. I have. I know some people.
I have. but actually, I rehired them both.
Yeah, that's right.
The two I fired, I rehired.
Yeah. So, every analogy breaks down, but love is not an analogy. So here's the thing. I'm not talking about love as a sentiment or an empty or not empty, but abstract sort of a squishy feeling. It's a practice and a discipline, right? Mm-hmm. So the real question is, what should love look like? And in a business context, what I've found is this, and then I'll tell you exactly what I mean. But to preface it, I have found, and I can't prove this scientifically, by the way, but anecdotally, I'm reasonably confident to say that once people understand this, most people already believe that love is just damn good business. But most people don't believe that most people believe that love is just damn good business. So what happens is we don't talk about it. It becomes like this little secret, right?
Right.
So what I mean is this, and let's start, as any business person should, if we're talking about, you and I have a passion for leadership. and primarily leadership in the business context, right?
Mhm.
Although it's applicable everywhere. But in a business context, you can't have a discussion of leadership without taking the customer into account, because you don't have a business without the customer.
Absolutely.
So isn't it obvious by now that we need our customers to love what we do for them?
Mhm.
They need to love the product, service, experience that we create for them, because anything less than that doesn't produce the kind of results that we want, right? Customer satisfaction, for example, if I say I'm satisfied with you, well, that's okay, but that's just as the term suggests, it's just satisfactory.
Mhm.
And therefore, I can get it anywhere.
Right.
Satisfaction is something I expect wherever I go. But when a customer says, I love you guys, I love this business, I love your product, I love the way your people respond to my needs, I love the way that you serve me, I love the brand image that you have, I love the way your clothes fit on my body, whatever it is, that is the kind of customer that we want. That's where our competitive advantage comes from. So we all know that, right? I mean, this should be pretty obvious. What I'm suggesting is that if we break that down and begin to back off from there a little bit, what becomes clear pretty quickly is that the only way to really create that meaningful, that experience for customers in a meaningful and sustainable way over time is to create an environment, or a culture, if you prefer, that people love working in. If I don't love working here, it's a lot less likely that I'm going to create an experience that my customers can love.
Absolutely. But in the languaging of love in business, there is an objective and a subjective. And the objective of the language is, I love your product.
Yeah.
Love your brand. These are externalized, objectified, separate
right.
things than I love you.
Yeah,
right?
that's
when
right.
it becomes subjective and personal, this is where I think that leaders often get uncomfortable. But as you were saying with Don Metal, people would say, I love him. I love working with him.
That's
right.
So this is exactly right. So the thing is,
right?
if you start with that objective, though, I love this company, which is very different from saying I love you, Dove. By the way, that rhymes. I love Dove. That's nice. Anyway, okay. If you back it off from there, it starts to get personal, right?
Yes.
Because now when a person says, I love working at this company, that they're referring to a number of things. It's the environment, it's the everything from the policies and everything from HR stuff to the physical environment. Remember when we had physical environments that we shared way back when? And then, but it's also the relationships that I have with the people on my team and the people that I work for, right? So it does start to become personal. And when I've talked with people, like I like the Dick Nettle example, of course, but many times over the years, if I sit down with an executive who's got a really great company, a really great team, and I ask him or her, tell me what you think about your team. Most of the time they're going to say something like, oh, I love them. Mm-hmm. Just without even thinking about it, right? Because we're having a one-on-one conversation. But if I take that same person and put it in a public format, maybe in front of that very team that they just talked about with me, and ask the same question, tell me what you think about your team. What do you think? They'll say, oh, they're great, they're awesome, they're champions,
highly professional.
Where'd that love thing go, right?
Exactly.
So it's not verbalized, but it's still there.
Yes.
So we all, I think, instinctually at least understand that if I love the experience of working here and the people that I work with and the people I'm doing this work for, my customers, in other words, then I'm going to be more productive. I'm going to be more committed. I'm going to be more creative. I'm going to be more anything more engaged, all those things that we measure, right? So, but then if you back it up one more step, it gets even more personal. Because I can't create or contribute to an environment that people love working in unless I have it myself first. So I need to love this work, the people, the product, as a leader, first and foremost. So it becomes very personal very quickly. So yeah, it starts in that objective, safer world, right? I mean, it's very safe to print the buttons and the banners that say, "We love our customers."
Yeah.
That's a very easy thing to do because it's very easy to say. But when you start to look underneath it and then ask, well, what should that look like? It does get uncomfortable and it is hard. This is not, this whole idea that love is soft, the soft stuff, nothing could be further from the truth. It's hard, man.
Fully agree.
It's hard. It's challenging. And it challenges your ego.
That's what I was going to say. I think it's difficult because it challenges one's concept of the rules. It challenges how we see business. It challenges how we see ourselves. And then ultimately, and this is where I think it hits the wall for a lot of people, not for my clients, because the clients I work with are, they're the people who are leaders. They are very high level leaders, but they come to me because they've already done some work on themselves. But it's that I find there's a lot of people who are almost there and they don't realize that actually love is the thing that's missing. That they're not quite at that place where they can own. I'll give you an example, if I may. A banker I work with, phenomenal guy. And I've been working with him now for a few years and I love working with him. And he's a very high level international banker, very successful. And he said something about his wife being upset with him about something. And I said, well, why wouldn't she be? And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, that wasn't very intimate, was it? And he said, well, no. And he goes, but Dove, and he starts then giving himself a really hard time for not being intimate. And I said, hold on a second. Hold on. What business are you in? It says banking. I said, anybody mention love there or intimacy? No. And because I know him as a client, your family, how did they do with love and intimacy? Terrible. Okay. So you're upset with yourself for not knowing this language of how to actually be in a place of love and intimacy when you've never had any learning in it. And this is the problem I see in a lot of the leadership space, is that we've got it segmented, that love is at home and love's with my family and love's with my lover. Right. And I can like a lot the people I work with, but not love. And love it's almost like it is a 4-letter word, but it's almost like it's a 4-letter word, because ultimately love is a mirror that reflects back. We have to look at ourselves. And I think, my opinion, is that's where it becomes difficult, is because I have to look at me. And as a leader, most of us want to lead others, but don't want to look at ourselves. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that is one of the difficulties with it. And it's true. There is a personal requirement for leaders at any level, right? No matter what it is that we're trying to do, our ability to engage, inspire, motivate others is deeply rooted in our own self-image, our internal environment, however you want to say it. Mm-hmm. So whatever it is that we're trying to do, ideally, the leader needs to look at him or herself first and ask the question, am I, to the best of my ability, am I the walking, talking, living, breathing example of the very thing that I'm asking other people to do? And without that question, people have a pretty good bullshit meter nowadays. And unless I ask that question, all I'm doing is going through the motions because I want other people to change. And those other people that I want to see change, they can tell if I'm buying this myself or not. Mm-hmm. So when you inject the word love into this, it raises the bar on all of this. Now we're really, to ask that question, do I really, do I love the people that work for me? Do I love this work? Am I capable of it? In any aspect of my life? Those are very profound questions. And they have to be dealt with no matter what the context is. So where I see it play out sometimes, I'm sure you've run into this, is let's say a company wants to evolve or change its culture. Culture is a popular word nowadays for all the right reasons. Okay. So I was talking to somebody recently who said, she was telling me about a previous experience she'd had at a job that it didn't end well because for a number of reasons, interpersonal dynamics among the team, but she was hired to help change the culture of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Title she was given was something like the culture czar, or the head of culture. The president of the company gave her that title and said, now go forth and change the culture. And what I said to her was, well, it's pretty obvious that was fated to fail from the very beginning. From the first moment where he gave you that title, I could tell you that it was just not going to work, because you can't delegate that as a leader, right? Because it starts personally. So this is the way I characterize that, Dov. When a senior executive says, we need to change the culture of this company, and delegates it, that's a problem, to put it mildly. And when you have senior leaders who say, given all the evidence as to how important culture is, right? Given all that evidence, they say, nah, nope, we're not going to do that here. There's one reason that they're really saying no. And this is a kind of a technical term, and a very formalized way of saying it. In essence, what they're saying is, I don't want to do that.
Right.
That's what they're saying. It's like the little child in them saying, nope, listen, everything's fine. Look at where I got. Look at me, senior executive, grand poobah, vice president, whatever. Everything that I've done so far has gotten me to where I am now. Why are you asking me to do that difficult work? I don't want to do that. I don't want to. Let's just keep it the way it is. That is, listen, I get it, but that is entirely egocentric. What that's saying is that the reason I'm a leader is to serve myself. And this, what we're talking about here, is exactly the opposite of that. The way that I'm going to benefit myself is by creating an environment of service to other people, including the folks that work for me.
Yeah, and I think even leaders who won't agree with us would still agree with the days, particularly now as we record this in early 2020, in the beginning of the second quarter of 2020. I think most leaders would agree, what worked won't work, right? We've all, we've been talking about that stuff for 10 years, you and I, for sure, at least 10 years, and many of the other great leadership people out there. What worked won't work. Okay, great. Now, then you had a pandemic, and you had everybody locked in at home, and you had everybody going remote, which really drove that home. They all get what worked won't work. And at the same time, their egos are still going to be screaming, I don't want to. It's not comfortable. I don't want to show my feelings.
Yeah.
Well, you're actually showing it by being a big baby.
Yeah, that's right. And what's so interesting about the times in which we're living as we're recording this is the great irony of the day is that our physical separation is showing us how important it is to connect with each other.
Exactly.
And actually forcing us to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom is, it's occurred to me recently that really what we're experiencing here planet-wide, first of all, is something, this is unprecedented. For the first time in human history, all of us are facing the same challenge. Everybody around the globe is facing the same challenge. Yeah. It looks different. It feels different depending on one's socioeconomic status and circumstances and all that. But underlying it is the same challenge. Well, that's really incredible. Mm-hmm. Because just a few weeks ago, when you asked a question of somebody else, hey, how you doing? Well, I'm good. How you doing? It was purely rhetorical, right? Yeah. You didn't even want an answer to the question. You just asked it because you're supposed to. Now, when you ask somebody, how are you doing? There's really an answer. Yeah. And that answer is important to that person. And it's important to that person. And you have an answer too, because we have a common enemy, as it were. And therefore, what it's creating, from what I'm seeing, is a greater capacity for empathy. It's a greater capacity for compassion, because we can relate to each other, no matter who we are, on at least some level. And so on that backdrop, with everybody using now, video technology of some sort, primarily Zoom, but whatever it is, it's like the greatest technology rollout ever. Usually in a company, you've seen this a million times, I'm sure. If a company's rolling out a new software program or new technology or a new CRM or whatever it is, you have to do the training. You have to get everybody up to speed on it. You have to convince them that this discomfort is worth it because, it'll be easier after all. And then you got your champions and you got your influencers and you're trying to get people. Well, this has all happened in a blink of an eye. We've all of a sudden, people that a few weeks ago never even heard of Zoom are like, Zoom monsters now.
Yeah.
Because we have to connect.
Yeah.
And that's always been true. It's always been true. When we shared the same physical space and could sit in a room and breathe the same oxygen, it was true then. But ironically, we didn't recognize it to the degree that we do now when we can't do that anymore. So there's a part of this, not to minimize the challenge and the physical downside to this whole thing and the deaths and all this. That's all awful. The positive side of this is, now more than ever, we're realizing, it's just a simple expression of love to check in on somebody on a Zoom call and say, how are you doing? And we're responding to it in a beautiful way with each other. My hope is, and my expectation is, that a good amount of this will stick when we get back to actually, for example, going to an office together. Mm-hmm. But we'll see.
Yeah, I've done several videos on this idea of going back to normal, and that normal is done. There is no normal, and it's a foolish idea, and it's actually extremely limiting. And I've said that because of the work that we do, this will go one of two ways. People will so quickly want to go back to normal, they will create the dysfunctional normal they had. And another bunch of people will go, oh, I don't have to do that crap anymore. I'm going to do something else. Yeah. And that may include being actually more connected to people and more willing to connect with people at a very personal level. Because a lot of the leaders that I work with privately, when all this first happened, they said to me, what's your best sort of leadership advice? I said, really? They said, yeah. I said, if you can do it, if you have a company that's got 100 people or less, I highly recommend that you make time for a 10-minute personal Zoom call with each of them. What do you mean personal? Do not talk business. Just how are you, and listen and pay attention. What's it like to try and get your work done while the baby's screaming in the background and the dog's barking? What's that like for you? Are you worried about any family members? And they're like, oh, really? And I said, watch what happens. Because I've written about that one of the challenges that's going to come out of this is that people are thinking, oh, the job market's going to be much better. It's going to be easier to hire because so many people got laid off. No, more people will become entrepreneurial. Less people will want to work for companies, and they'll go, oh, I can make it on my own. I'm fine. And they'll do that. So you better really care about your people. Like you said, I honestly believe if you don't make your people fall in love with you, someone else will.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, it's interesting, this word normal comes up a lot nowadays.
Yeah.
The biggest problem I have with it is the phrase new normal referring to today, because this is a new abnormal.
Exactly.
And what people generally equate normal with is, normal equals eternal, right? As in, this is now the way it's going to be forevermore.
No.
And we all know that that's not true. It's easy to forget. We don't know how long this is going to last, but this is not the new normal. This will pass. Sure. The question is, what will the new reality look like? I don't have as much of an issue with the word normal as it applies to the future, as long as the definition of normal is part of normal is the fact that things are always changing. That's right.
That's the truth. But that's the again, we're back to the egoic mind, because the egoic mind sees the same and safe as the same thing. They're identical. And so it wants to keep things the same. So it says, I don't like this COVID thing, and I don't like this isolation thing, but I'm learning to cope with it. Now you want to take it away from me? I'm not okay with this. This is my new normal. And on the other end, when you have to all stay home, that was, oh my God. So there's this constant evolution that we're all facing and that we're all clinging on. And I always say to people, you can't get to where you want to go to while you're hanging on to where you were.
That's right.
It's just not possible. But we're all, and understanding that psychologically we all do it, the discipline is let go. The discipline is let go. I always tell the story of bungee jumping, standing on the edge of the thing at 140 feet. And the guy said, I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, bungee. When I say bungee, you jump. And he said 3, and my hands went and locked onto the railing like steel, like I was the Terminator grip, right? And I just held on. And I realized if I waited till he said bungee, I was not letting go. So as he said 2, I jumped because I knew if we got to bungee, it wasn't going to happen. And it was that part of me, like all of us, that wants to cling on to the safety of what we know. And that's so important for us to know how to let go. We're going to take a little break here. Then we're going to come back with some more with Steve Farber and why love is just damn good business. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by one of our other podcasts, which is Curiosity Bites. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how do we bring people together who completely disagree? This is exactly what your mind and your soul have been craving. It's a chance to sit in on some real and sometimes intense conversations with some of the world's most interesting people, including astronauts, neuroscientists, philosophers, holy people, quantum physicists, skeptics, entrepreneurs, entertainers, and some folks you might think of as being, well, let's just go a-holes, who are actually really, truly fascinating individuals. To want to know more about Curiosity Bites, simply go over to dovebaron.com and find out how you can sink your teeth into an episode of Curiosity Bites. Okay, welcome back. Let's dig a little bit further here because we're talking about why love is just damn good business. Now, one of the things that I know that you and I both speak about, Steve, that is baffling is that in the last 10 years, there's been about close to $1 trillion spent on leadership development. So let's talk about it from your point of view. What's wrong with leadership development? Because I think we're both in favor of leadership development. We're just going, you spent $1 trillion, something's not working.
Yeah, because alongside that shocking statistic is the other that around employee engagement that Gallup does every year, and essentially the needle hasn't moved much.
Well, it's actually gone in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's within a couple of percentage points. So when you kind of factor it all out, it's like just kind of a steady line. And one would think that if you're really developing great leaders, that they'd be developing great cultures, which would produce more engagement. So where's the disconnect? Yep. And I think it's because of what we've been talking about here. I mean, I hate to sound like a one-note song, but it's because love has been missing from the equation. We tend to boil it down and sanitize it a little bit, right? So we talk like the word passion, for example, has become more of an accepted word. In the beginning, that was a pretty provocative word too. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have we've created a situation for ourselves where, and you mentioned this earlier, we create a dividing line between so-called work and so-called home, between personal and business. And to a degree, it belongs there, right? Mm-hmm. There are things that I do at work that are different from things that I do at home. I'm engaged in different activities. I'm engaged with different people. We have different objectives. I get all that. But there is a rather insidious way that we tend to describe that. Mm-hmm. And we talk about it in terms of work-life balance, okay? Work-life balance. Now, here's the thing. I don't have a problem with the word balance. Everything in our lives would be nice if we could balance it a little bit more. I can balance, the things I do for financial gain with the things that I do for, just for hobbies or fun. I get that. The problem I have is the phrase work/life. Work-life, because what that implies, quite literally, is that there are two different things. So if work is not life, then what is it?
Death.
It's death. And so there's this underlying thing that says work is the shit we got to do in order to live. And as time goes on, we're spending more and more of our lives, of our waking hours at work. So shouldn't the process, the experience of work be a fulfilling part of our lives? It is part of our lives. We can, no matter what we like to call it, it's part of our lives. So what is it? Here's that one note song that I was talking about. What is it that for the vast majority of human beings makes life a more enjoyable, meaningful pursuit? It's love. It's the love that we have for what we do. It's the love that we have for our, family, for our kids, for our. So what I'm suggesting is it's that same dynamic at work. Love may, it may not look exactly like it does, and it shouldn't in some cases, like it does. For what does love look like of spouse or child or significant other? But it's still love. It's love of something or someone. It could be love of the values that you stand for, love of the cause that you believe in, love of the customers that you serve, love of the great future we can create together. I mean, there's something here. And we can get caught up in the semantics of it, but I don't think we need to, because love is one of those words that we kind of know it when we see it, even though we use it very differently in different contexts, right? So for example, I'm fond of saying, so I'll say it again, I love pizza. I also love my wife. I love them very differently.
Oh, come on.
We've
got the film, mate. We have got the secret tape of you making love to a pizza.
I don't know how you got your hands on
that. I am phoning your wife.
How much do you want? How much do you want? How much do you want to get that footage back? So the thing is, we use that word because there's a common experience that we recognize there, and the same is true at work. So I believe that if we consciously and intentionally, as business people, really try to answer the question, what do we need to do here in order to have our employees love us? What do I need to do as a leader to have the people on my team love the experience of working together towards a common goal? If we add that element to it, all of that leadership training and development, which is really important stuff, is going to become more effective because it becomes more personal, and that's going to reflect. We're going to be able to measure that over time. And listen, there's only one way to prove it. We got to do it. We got to do it, and we have to do it more universally. So it really comes down to the question: what should love look like? Again, because this is not about a sentiment or a feeling; it's about a practice.
So you brought up something that I think can really help people, which is we tend to globalize things like love, and I've often said, because we do love as part of our work, and I'll say, okay, describe love, right? And then people will always say, well, what do you mean? Describe love. Well, love of my family or love of pizza, right? And I'll say, describe love. And I say, it's not possible to do it without context, is it? And they go, no, that's the point.
Yeah.
Your fear is because you've taken away the context. I'm not asking you to love the person you work with the way you love your lover. That would get you canned and possibly put in jail. That's not appropriate. But add context and suddenly your fear can be dissolved. Yeah. It's the context. As with anything, it's the context that counts. Not the content, but the context. The content is love. Yes, the context is different. I still love every ex I ever had. Some of them I have no interest in ever talking to again, but I have love for who they are as human beings. I have love for what they brought to my life. I have love for a memory, but not for being in my life. I love my children, but certainly not the way I love my wife. I love my grandchildren, but it's different again. So context is so important. And I love that you're bringing this down to this idea, this understanding that love as a discipline and a practice requires you to consider context so that you're not Joe Biden being investigated for the way you maybe innocently massage somebody's shoulders.
Yeah.
Right?
So let me give you an example of this very thing, because I'm a bit of a context freak myself.
Yeah,
so,
me too. Good.
So we're totally on the same page. And in the context of business, the question is, what specifically do we need to do? There's actually variations on this question. What specifically do we need to do to create an environment that people will love working in? Or how can I better show my customers that I love them? So if you ask the question, if you bring a team together as you know, we often do, to say, okay, we need to improve our customer service. So let's do a little brainstorming session. Here's the question that we're going to brainstorm. What can we do to improve our customer service? You're going to get answers and you're going to get ideas, and they'll be good ones. But if you change the context by asking the question a little bit differently, something like, how can we better show our customers that we love them? Oh man, now you have a very different standard. Yes. And you've raised the bar. Yeah. So I think part of the resistance to the idea of love in business is a misinterpretation that it means we're going to have to lower the standards, because then our objective is just to make people happy all the time, right? Mm-hmm. I love you, so you don't have to do that. Well, I love you, so don't finish that project on time because I love you and I don't want to create any stress. That's not what we're talking about. If I really love this business and love the customer and love it raises the bar, it raises the expectations. The standards go up, not down. So let me give you an example of what that could look like. Okay, one of my current favorite examples is a company in Jacksonville, Florida, by the name of Trailer Bridge. Okay, so Trailer Bridge is a shipping and logistics company. So they ship goods primarily from Florida to Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, et cetera. Now, they've been around for 30 years, and their background, and I'm not speaking out of school here, their background is that they were awful. They were a toxic place. They were at, tremendous turnover because nobody wanted to stay there. Mm. And they had terrible, customer responses and reviews. The only way they got customers was by undercutting everybody else. So they were they were cheap. Mm-hmm. And as a result of all that, you put it all together, they went bankrupt, right? Right. Then they burned through 4 CEOs in 2 years. So you can imagine what that place felt like. Mm. Then one of their senior team, a guy named Mitch Luciano, was tapped by the board to take over. They said, okay, Mitch, it's your turn. And he said, yeah. So here's what he said. Now here's the backdrop for this. What you need to understand about Mitch is that he was a love guy. He was a love guy. And he had been, and I learned this later on after we met, but he had been a huge fan of my books. The first one being The Radical Leap, my first book that came out in its first edition in 2004. And LEAP is a roadmap that stands for love, energy, audacity, and proof. So I've been teaching this love thing in my books for quite some time. And he read that book and he said, yes, this is the way, this is what I'm all about. This is the way I'm going to lead. And that's the way he led in his sphere. Mm-hmm. So when the board said, okay, Mitch, your turn, he knew from the outset that what he had to do is create an environment that people loved working in. Mm-hmm. Which was a radical thought given that everybody hated the place at the time, right? So here's what he did. He asked the question, and he asked it in many different ways, but fundamentally the question was, what should that look like here at Trailer Bridge? And the first thing he said was, okay, I'll do it, but I won't take the title of CEO. I'll take the title of president, but I'll earn the title of CEO. I'll be CEO when the employees think that I'm the CEO. Wow. Right? So that's symbolic right out of the gate. Yeah. The next thing he did was also kind of symbolic. He said, okay, what would an environment that people love working in, what would the dynamics be among the people? Well, they would know each other pretty well, right? So it had been just a standard at Trailer Bridge for a long time that people wore name tags
Sure.
to work, name badges. And it was a small company, like 120, 130 people at the time. And he said, we're 130 people. We should know each other's names. So he got rid of the name tags. And of course, what that meant for him as the leader is that he had to learn everybody's names too.
Yep.
Then he looked at the physical environment, his cubicle city with floor to ceiling dividers. So people would sit next to each other for years and never see each other. So he lowered the heights of the cubicles and he said, let's just start looking at each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Told his managers to get out of the office and start, just seeing people, really basic, simple stuff.
Yeah.
But again, trying to answer the question, what should love look like here? Then he set up a common area in the break room, brought in ping pong tables, foosball tables, the usual like Silicon Valley kind of stuff, right?
Sure.
Then he brought in a food truck on a Thursday afternoon, bought lunch for everybody in the company so they could all sit around and have lunch together. And he said, oh, this is cool. So now it's a tradition to this very day. I think it is Thursday, they bring in a different food truck. Everybody has lunch together on the company's dime. And it went on and on and on, hundreds of things. And then they looked at the customer experience. And here's what became very clear. They had a long-standing policy that if they had a barge that was supposed to be going from Jacksonville to Puerto Rico, for example, they would not sail that barge until it was at least 75% full. Because if it was too empty, they would lose money on the shipment. And of course, we're in business. We're not in business to lose money, even though they're pretty good at it. That's what's going to happen. Which, if you look at the balance sheet, seems to make sense.
Sure.
On the surface. But when you look at it from the customer's perspective, it all falls apart, right?
Sure.
Because if you're shipping a car to Puerto Rico you're sending a gift to your family, and you tell them it's going to be there on such and such a date, and then you find out that it never sailed because the company that's shipping it couldn't sell enough space on their barge. What does that say? What does that say about the customer? We don't, it's not about you, it's about us, right? Yeah. So they asked the question. Here's the context. Here's the question. If we loved our customers, what would we do under those circumstances? And then the answer is pretty obvious. We sail because we said we would. And that's what they started doing. And so you start adding all these things up. And again, there are many, many other things. But now, little by little, their reputation in the marketplace started to change. Little by little, they started to get more customers because they say, hey, these people are great. And now, fast forward all these years later, they were voted number 1 and number 2 best place to work in the city of Jacksonville.
Wow.
The last year of the company, or last 2 years of the company, their revenues exceeded the previous 25 years of the company combined.
What? Wow, that's fabulous.
They're expanding, they're blowing up, they're winning all kinds of service awards. And if you were to ask Mitch, which I encourage anybody to do, what's this all about? He will tell you that it's love. They consciously and intentionally built an environment that people would love working in by just simply asking the question, what should it look like? And by the way, if you were to talk to Mitch and say, hey, I hear you turned this company around, he'd be the first to push back on that, because to him, it was, they did it together. It wasn't me, it was us. And he means it. It's not false modesty.
No.
He means it. And, you and I, and, we all know that it never would have happened without his leadership. And it was a collaborative effort. And people love working there. It's an amazing, amazing team. I went there to visit not too long ago. And they had this, this kind of tradition when you walk through that, that common area that I described where they lower the cubicles, right? So everybody can see what everybody's doing. And so I had spent the day there, and I was leaving, and they all stood up and started shooting at me with Nerf pistols.
Oh, fantastic.
Apparently it's a tradition they have when people walk through that office. It was fantastic. I mean, what a great place. It just, you could feel it. It's palpable. As soon as you walk into that place, you go, this is different. So I don't know. You tell me, is that abstract, kumbaya, touchy-feely stuff? No, it's just, if I could be so presumptuous as to quote myself, damn good business.
Yeah. And what's interesting about it is one of the things you mentioned in there is the pushback of, well, that doesn't work with the bottom line, Dov. That doesn't work with the bottom line, Steve. I mean, you want us to sail and we're not full. No, I want you to show that you have integrity and that you're worth working with.
And yes, and don't forget, the objective in a business is to make money, right? So what happened on that measurement? They're never less than 98% full. They're always full now. Why? Because they have a reputation of sailing no matter what.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, it was a bit of a gulp factor at first, I'm sure, but understanding that if you create that kind of reliable service for your customers, they will come and the money will come with it. And it does.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely. I mean, it really is. It's so brilliant. And again, it's so simple, but simple is not easy, but it's simple.
It's simple and it's very challenging. So, the work that we do at the Extreme Leadership Institute, for example, that's really kind of the essence of what we do is we help companies to apply these things, right? To operationalize love, for example, which is a phrase that I love to use. I think it's accurate. And, this isn't about coming in, dipping people in training and saying, see you later. It's, it can be a multi-year effort. So some of our clients we've worked with we have one client that we're on year 3 with right now, and they're making great progress. And one of the ways that we like to measure it is that, best place to work kind of status, because it's nice, it's objective, it's clean. And if we could say, hey, look, we operationalized love and we went from not being on the list to being number 15 on the list to being number 2 on the list and then staying there, that's a nice objective measurement. And by the way, that's not a random set of numbers. That's a company called OAC Services in Seattle that had exactly that same experience with the best place to work list in the state of Washington in their size demographic. Yeah, it's so the proof is there, and it's always comes down to the leaders recognizing that this is something that they want to do. And this is the other thing that I think is really critical. And I'm curious, Dov, if you've come to the same conclusion for yourself in your work. What I've realized is that I'm really not in the business of convincing anybody of this. I'm not in the business of convincing anybody of anything. I'm in the confirmation business, not the convincing business. Because what I've seen over and over again, take a guy like Mitch from Trailer Bridge, for example. It's not that they hear this idea and went from being somebody who hates human beings and has this amazing miraculous transformation and now is suddenly a love proponent. More it's people who've already known this, have had the instinct, have had the impulse, but have never acted on it because our conditioning and our training tells them you're not supposed to do that. And hearing these ideas, it just kind of lights them up and say, well, I've always known that. I've always felt that, but I thought there was something wrong with me. So maybe now I'll be more emboldened and I'll step up and act on that basis. Those are the people that I'm in business to help. So I'm not trying to convince anybody. No. Listen, we can lay out the arguments all day long, but the bottom line is, if I just think this is crap, then it's crap.
Sure. The thing is that, when we talk about culture and those kinds of things, you and I both know that leadership, in essence, is by example. It's permission, and so, as the quote consultant, quote strategist, quote whatever prefix you want to put on there, we often are coming in to give permission to something they already knew.
Absolutely.
Like, you already know this is the way it's supposed to be, right? Yeah. Well, then stop following those idiots who are freaking, my language, freaking dinosaurs, right? Yeah. They're done. It's time. Steve, we are right at the edge of the show. This has been a wonderful conversation. I would love to hear from you one simple, practical skill tool that our listeners, our viewers can take away in the context of what we've spoken about that will just sort of hit home for them? What's the best?
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to suggest that you start with a question. So, I gave you the example of Trailer Bridge and all these things that they did. And all of that is based on asking ourselves the right questions. So I'll frame it up like this. Doing what you love is the foundation for everything we're talking about here, but it's not the whole story. So the way that I like to position it, it's also the subtitle of the book. It's do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. So it kind of covers all the ground, right? So doing what you love is the foundation for this whole thing, not the whole story, but the foundation, right?
Yes.
And you're doing what you love for a purpose, which is the second section, in the service of people. You're doing what you love to serve the people around you, to serve the people that work for you, the people that you work for, your customers. So do what you love in the service of people, and you're serving them not just because you feel obligated to, or because you're supposed to, but because you want to have an impact, and you're serving them to such a degree that the result is reciprocity. They love you in return, right? When you have customers that raise their hand and say, I love what you do for me, those are customers for life, and we want more of those. So do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. That's the framework. So what I suggest you start with is just a simple self-reflection. I'm borrowing from the premise of the Net Promoter Score here, right? So Net Promoter Score is a very powerful and elegant way of measuring customer response that basically says, on a scale of 1 to 10, customer, how likely are you to recommend our product or service to friends, family, colleagues, et cetera? And the idea behind that Net Promoter Score is that it's got to be a 9 or a 10, or it's a fail. If I say 8, it's pretty good. 8 out of 10, not bad. No, it's got to be a 9 or a 10. So having said that, start with this. Take each of those elements, do what you love, and on a scale, element number 1 is do what you love. On a scale of 1 to 10, ask this question of yourself: to what degree am I doing what I love? Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. Part 2, to what degree am I serving people? Scale of 1 to 10. And the third one, which is most closely related to the Net Promoter Score, to what degree do the people I'm serving love how I'm serving them? And you'll find that you might be all 10s on all of them, and that's fantastic. And for others, it'll be like, well, that'd be nice. So you'll be able to start asking these questions. What do I need to do to get it to a 10, to get my work to a 10, to get how I'm serving people? How do I get that to a 10? And how do I crank up the level of that service where they're rating me a 10 as well? That's a good place to start, and it opens up all possibilities for future action.
Solid, really solid. Thank you, Steve. Listen, mate, I've loved this conversation. It's been a joy and a pleasure. Would you please tell our listeners and our viewers where they could find out more about you? And I know you have a lot of resources. So,
sure. Thank you for asking. So there are 2 different websites. Extremeleadership.com is the Extreme Leadership Institute website, and stevefarber.com. There are lots of resources on both of those, lots of videos and downloads and that kind of great stuff. And if you really would like to do a little more self-assessment, if you go to loveisgoodbiz.com, there is a self-assessment that you can take where you can get a sense of how you are on the elements of LEAP that I mentioned earlier: love, energy, audacity, and proof. It'll generate a personalized report for you with a lot of cool ideas.
Very cool. Thank you, sir. Really want to thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure and honor again for you, dear listener. Just, as I said, we will make sure that we put all those links into the show notes. And of course, the basic one is just go to stevefarber.com. And again, we want to thank our guest today, Steve. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for
Thank you, Dov. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And for you, dear listener, you can hang out with other conscious leaders, and you can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Just simply look for the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your capability. If you want to find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or as a leadership strategist for yourself or for your organization, simply go to dovbaron.com. Because unified meaning, or as we call it, finding your dragonfire, is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness in all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how love is just damn good business. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your dragonfire to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.